Maybe you clicked out of curiosity, or maybe, without realizing, you were looking for a quiet place where words move slowly, and even silence has a role in the story. I wrote this with care, like stitching together memories, hurts, and small discoveries, hoping that somewhere along the way, you might see a piece of yourself here. If that happens, even for just a moment, stay. Listen as long as you like, and if you feel like leaving a little sign, maybe a thought, a share, or even just a quiet "I'm here," know that it means more than you think. And if you'd like to walk with me through more stories like this, you're always welcome to join, anytime. They say home is supposed to be the safest place you'll ever know. For me, it was the place I learned to keep my mouth shut. When I was 8, Mom lost her job and rent went up. She didn't have many options, so she moved us back into my grandparents' house. It wasn't really a welcome home kind of thing. It was more like, you'll stay here until you figure something out. My grandfather, Russ, ran the place like it was his own kingdom. He wasn't the kind of grandpa who told stories or bought you ice cream. He was loud, quick to anger, and always made sure everyone knew he was in charge. If the TV remote went missing, it was automatically my fault. If dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted, Mom would take the blame. Then there was my Aunt Brittany, my mom's older sister. She lived there too, and it felt like she had inherited his crown. Brittany was sharp-tongued and knew how to push people's buttons, especially mine. She'd brag about her job in town, the people she knew, the things she could buy. And me? I was just the kid. My grandmother, Susan, was there too, but she mostly floated in the background, always cleaning something that wasn't dirty, always pretending not to hear the fights. She didn't yell, but her silence was just as heavy. The air in that house was thick, like you couldn't breathe too deeply without upsetting someone. I remember lying on the thin mattress in the spare room we shared, listening to my mom whisper, "Just a little longer, Jonah. We'll get out soon." But even at 8, I knew what she meant. This wasn't really home. Not for her. Not for me. We were guests in a place that never wanted us, and the only way to survive was to stay small, stay quiet, and hope the storm passed without hitting us. Before we moved into my grandparents' house, life wasn't easy, but it was ours. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with carpet so old it never really looked clean. The heater rattled in the winter, and in summer, we'd set up a fan in the window just to sleep. Mom worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs at once, so I'd sit at the laundromat with a backpack full of books while she folded clothes. It was never glamorous. Sometimes dinner was boxed mac and cheese, sometimes just cereal. But even then, I never felt poor in the same way I did at Russ's house. Back in that little apartment, we laughed. Mom would make shadow puppets on the wall when the power got cut off. She'd read me library books in funny voices until I fell asleep. We didn't have much, but we had peace. That changed the moment we walked back into my grandparents' house. Suddenly, every move felt judged. If I left a glass on the counter, Russ would bark that I was lazy. If I got too excited about something, Brittany would roll her eyes and mutter about kids with no discipline. And every time Mom stepped in, she'd take the glass from me and wash it before I could blink. She'd tell me gently to lower my voice, not because she cared, but because she wanted to stop the storm before it started. I saw it happen over and over again, my mom putting herself in the line of fire so I didn't have to. If Russ wanted someone to yell at, she volunteered herself. If Brittany needed to humiliate someone, Mom absorbed it so I could slip away. To me, she was like a shield. Not indestructible, not untouched, but strong enough to keep me standing behind her. I think that's when I realized she wasn't just my mom. She was my only safe place in that entire house. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of quiet day when I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd get through without any drama. I was reaching for a library book I'd left on a shelf in the hallway. My hand brushed against a vase, one of those heavy ceramic ones my Aunt Brittany liked to brag about buying with her own money. It tipped before I could grab it. The crash echoed through the house like a gunshot. Shards scattered across the floor. I froze. My heart was pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. "Mom!" I shouted instinctively. "I dropped something." I thought telling the truth was the right thing. Mom always said honesty mattered, but before she even made it out of the kitchen, Brittany was already there. Her heels clicked down the hall like a warning. She saw the broken vase, then me, and her face twisted. "You little brat!" she snapped, grabbing my arm. "Do you know what that cost?" I tried to stammer out an apology, but she didn't wait. She yanked me hard, and before I could blink, she shoved me against the wall. My head hit with a dull crack. For a second, everything blurred. I tasted copper in my mouth. The drywall left a white smear on my hair, and I could smell the faint, chalky dust mixing with the iron smell of blood dripping from my nose. When my vision cleared, Brittany was still holding me by the arm, glaring like I'd ruined her life instead of just a piece of pottery. Her eyes weren't just angry, they were disgusted, like I was less than human. And then I heard it. From the living room, my grandfather Russ let out this low, rumbling laugh. Not amused, not kind, more like he enjoyed watching it happen. "That's what you get for being careless," he called out, voice thick with mockery. I stood there, stunned, my nose bleeding, my head pounding, and I couldn't understand it. I told the truth. I admitted what I did. Wasn't that supposed to matter? But in that house, honesty didn't mean anything. All it did was paint a target on my back. After the vase incident, things didn't calm down. They got worse. Brittany locked the back door and pocketed the keys. My phone, well, technically Mom's phone, disappeared. She smirked and told me, "Your mom's running away because she's weak. Don't expect her to protect you forever." I didn't totally understand what she meant, but I knew one thing. We weren't leaving. Not yet. Those 3 days felt like years. The house wasn't big, but it felt like a cage. I wasn't allowed outside. Every time I crept toward the door, I found it locked. My toys? Brittany accidentally stepped on my action figures. She held my books over the trash can, threatening to toss them in. And the whole time, the TV in the living room blared so loud, it made the walls vibrate. It wasn't just noise. It was like a message. Don't even bother speaking up. No one's listening anyway. Nights were the worst. The spare room Mom and I slept in was small, with one tiny window that barely opened. When the lights went out, I'd curl up close to her, listening to the sound of her breathing, trying to match it so I wouldn't cry too loud. Mom tried to keep me calm. She'd whisper stories, rub my back, promise me that it wouldn't last forever. I could hear the strain in her voice, like she wanted to believe it just as much as I did. She'd sit by the door sometimes, holding her head in her hands, then turn back to me with this forced smile. Looking back, I realized she was terrified too. But at 8 years old, all I saw was someone refusing to break, even when everything around us was cracked and rotting. For me, those 3 days became less about time and more about atmosphere. The heavy air of a locked house, the buzzing of an old TV drowning out my mom's voice, and the constant reminder that in that place, I wasn't really a kid. I was just someone's target. It's strange. Adults talk about dates, hours, timelines. I don't remember any of that. What I remember is the dark, the noise, and the way my mom's hand never let go of mine. It was the middle of the night when Mom shook me awake. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Jonah, get your jacket." Quietly. I remember the glow of the alarm clock, 3:07 a.m., the kind of hour where the house felt dead, except my heart wasn't. It was hammering so hard I thought it might wake everyone up. Mom layered me in 2 jackets, shoved my backpack into my arms, and pressed a finger to her lips. No words, just a look that said, "Trust me." She led me to the attic. I'd never been up there before. It smelled like dust and old wood. The floor creaked under our steps, and every sound felt too loud, like the house itself was listening. We crawled on our hands and knees until Mom pushed open a small vent. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and clean compared to the stale air inside. "Go first," she whispered. I hesitated, staring into the darkness beyond. It wasn't far, but it felt like stepping into another world. Mom gave me the tiniest nod, and I slid through, landing in the neighbor's backyard with a soft thud. A second later, she followed, grabbing my hand the moment her feet hit the ground. We ran. Not like people jogging down a street, but like prey bolting from a trap. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I never asked to stop. I could hear Mom's heartbeat when she pulled me close to cross the road, and I matched my pace to hers. The world outside was so quiet compared to the chaos inside that house. No yelling, no TV rattling the walls, just the sound of our shoes slapping. Mom knelt beside me, brushing my hair back, her hands trembling but steady enough to make me believe we were safe. That was the first moment I realized we'd done it. We were out. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like someone's target. I felt free, scared, exhausted, but free. The gas station wasn't the end. It was just the first place we stopped breathing like hunted animals. Mom used the payphone out front to call a friend, and we waited under those buzzing fluorescent lights for hours until headlights finally pulled in. Her friend didn't ask questions. She just drove us to a shelter in the next county. That first night there, I lay on a bunk bed with thin sheets that smelled like bleach. It wasn't home, but at least the doors locked from the inside, not the outside. We stayed there about 2 weeks. The staff were kind enough, volunteers who handed out donated toys and cereal bars. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we didn't belong anywhere. Eventually, we moved into a small, subsidized apartment. It had peeling paint and a bathroom sink that leaked, but Mom called it our fresh start. She tried to make it warm, glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, books lined neatly on the shelf. She wanted me to feel safe again. But I wasn't the same kid anymore. I stopped reading. The library books just sat there untouched. Once, I picked one up and immediately set it back down, afraid the sound of a falling object would trigger the same chaos as the vase had. Even simple things, dropping a spoon, spilling milk, made my stomach twist like I'd done something unforgivable. At school, I stayed quiet. Too quiet. Teachers asked why I wasn't raising my hand like before. Kids invited me to play, but I lingered at the edges, worried I'd mess something up and make everyone angry. And at night, when the apartment was still, I buried my face in the pillow and whispered the same words over and over. I didn't mean to be bad. I wasn't even sure who I was talking to. Brittany, Russ, maybe even Mom. But the thought had carved itself into me, that somehow existing in that house had made me wrong. Looking back, that was the lowest point. I was free, technically, but inside, I felt smaller than ever, like I'd become a ghost of the kid I used to be. After we settled into that tiny apartment, I thought maybe things would finally slow down. But Mom didn't stop. If anything, she sped up. By day, She worked at a print shop, long hours on her feet, coming home with ink stains on her hands. By night, after she tucked me in, I'd watch her set up at the small kitchen table with a sketch pad and an old laptop that took forever to load. I pretended to sleep sometimes, but I always kept the door cracked. From my bed, I could hear the scratch of her pencil, the hum of the computer fan, and every so often, the soft sound of her crying when she thought I was asleep. She wasn't just doodling. She was building something. Logos, designs, words I didn't understand but could tell were important. I'd wake up in the morning and find mock-ups of shirts or posters spread across the table, coffee rings staining the corners. She called it Ghost Nest. I didn't fully get it back then, but I knew it had something to do with what we'd lived through. Making art out of pain, giving shape to what was invisible. To me, she looked like a superhero in those moments. No cape, no spotlight, just a woman fighting exhaustion with nothing but determination and a ballpoint pen. But I also saw the cost. Her hands shook sometimes. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She'd wipe her face quickly if she noticed me watching, then smile like everything was fine. Even at 8, I understood what that meant. She was carrying more than just herself. She was carrying me too. I didn't know how far it would go, how big it would get. All I knew was that my mom was turning something awful into something strong. And even if I didn't understand the details, I felt it. She was proving that the people who tried to break us hadn't won. And for the first time since leaving that house, I started to believe maybe we could build something better. I didn't know the full plan at the time. Mom never explained the details to me, probably because I was just a kid, and also because she didn't want me caught up in it. But I could tell something was happening. She was calmer, more focused, almost like she was waiting for the right moment. One afternoon, she told me to come sit with her in the car. We parked a block away from a little office building. She handed me a pair of headphones and set up a small screen on her laptop. "Just watch," she whispered. Inside the building, Brittany strutted in wearing a bright blazer and heels too tall for the cracked sidewalk. She looked every bit like she thought she was important. I'd seen that walk 1,000 times in our grandparents' house, like she owned the floor she stood on. But this time, it was different. The camera inside caught everything. Brittany sat down for what she thought was a job interview. She smiled, talked about her values. And then, my stomach twisted, she said, "I practically raised my sister's kid. He's like my own. I taught him discipline." I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. It was a lie, and the worst part was how easily she said it, like she believed it herself. Then the people interviewing her pushed back gently, asking more questions. Her answers turned sloppy, defensive. She bragged, contradicted herself, and the mask started to slip. Mom didn't need to yell. She didn't need to storm in and fight. She just let the truth roll out on camera. A few days later, the company posted a statement. They would never work with anyone involved in abuse. And the video spread, small-town news, blogs, even neighbors whispering. Watching from our apartment, I saw the look on Brittany's face when the story hit. The power she always carried in her voice, in her posture, it was gone. People were laughing at her, not with her. For the first time, she wasn't feared. She was pitied, mocked. And that's when it hit me. Mom had won without even raising her voice. She hadn't slammed doors or screamed like Russ or Brittany always did. She used patience, proof, and timing. To me, it felt like magic. The woman who used to shield me was now standing tall, not just protecting, but conquering. And seeing Brittany crumble under the weight of her own lies? That was the first time I realized monsters could fall. After the video of Brittany spread, the silence from my grandparents' house didn't last long. First, it was my grandmother, Susan. The phone rang late one night, and Mom let it go to voicemail. I heard her voice, shaky and broken. "Tara, we didn't know it hurt you this much. Please, just talk to us." But I remembered the nights she watched me bleed and said nothing. Her tears on the phone didn't sound like guilt. They sounded like regret for getting caught. Then came Brittany. She sent emails, texts, even a letter. Her words didn't sound like the aunt who once shoved my head into a wall. They sounded desperate, pleading. "You ruined me. You don't understand. I have nothing left. Please, Tara. We're still family." And then, one afternoon, an envelope showed up in our mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single photo, me, younger, holding a soccer trophy. On the back, in Russ's handwriting, were 3 words: "We miss you." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at it. For a moment, I felt everything all at once: anger, sadness, even a flicker of longing. A part of me wanted to believe it, that maybe they really did miss me, that maybe I hadn't been worthless to them after all. But then I remembered the laugh, the one Russ let out when Brittany shoved me into the wall. I remembered Grandma vacuuming right past us while Mom held ice to my face. I remembered Brittany's smirk when she locked the door and hid the keys. My throat tightened. I looked at Mom. She didn't say a word. She just waited, letting me decide for myself. And that's when I tore the picture in half. The rip echoed louder in my head than Russ's laugh ever had. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't their target. I was my mother's son. And choosing her meant letting the rest of them go. When Ghost Nest grew, it didn't just become a brand. It became something bigger. Mom partnered with shelters, spoke with counselors, and eventually started a scholarship fund for kids who had lived through what I did. She called it the Wall Breakers. For the first time, she asked if I wanted to help, not just as her son, but as someone who understood. That night, I sat at my desk with a piece of paper. I drew a house split in 2. On one side, vines and chains covered the windows. On the other, the wall was cracked open, with birds flying out through an open window. I titled it, "Finally." When I showed it to Mom, she didn't say anything at first. She just pulled me into a hug, tighter than any hug I'd ever felt, like she knew this wasn't just a drawing. It was my way of closing the door on the past. Months later, we stood together on stage at the launch event for the scholarship program. The room was full of people, survivors, volunteers, reporters. I should have felt nervous, but I didn't. I felt steady because Mom was beside me. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a familiar figure near the back of the hall. Brittany.